And then, so the deal we worked out with Carolco was that there'd be the shooting script, there'd be Cameron's script, and there'd be a lot that I would write. So the novelization broke all kinds of rules. Normally, novelizers are required by contract to stick, they can't change a line of the dialogue. And all they can do is add interiorization of what the character's thinking in perhaps an action scene and describe a lot of stuff. And I just didn't want to do that. So they said, fine, as long as we can recognize the movie in the book, good. So the novelization broke a lot of rules, and it may be unique to this day. And then in breaking more rules, it was a New York Times bestseller. It's an odd thing because it's a novel, but it isn't. It's based on a screenplay. And anyhow, so that was years ago, and Gauntlet 2, let's reissue that too. And we're going to it'll be different because this will be the first hardback.
Okay, yeah.
And then I wrote an introduction for it that talks about a lot of the stuff that I just told you. And then I have an essay called Rambo and Me, the story behind the story, that's available online for 99 cents, but it's not in print. And so I thought we'll add that. And then there was an essay when the film came out in 1985. The Los Angeles Times did a huge piece about the movie and the book called The Curious Evolution of John Rambo. In which they talked about, there were 26 scripts, there were 5 studios, people like Paul Newman. Paul Newman was at one time being approached to play police chief with Martin Ritt directing. Steve McQueen at one time was going to be Rambo with Sidney Pollack directing. And for various reasons, these films didn't reach the screen. And the reporter for the LA Times, which is a show business town, did this massive essay talking about all of the iterations for this curious evolution thing. And so I told Gauntlet Press about it, and Gauntlet Press paid the LA Times a fee to reprint it. And there'll be a lot of stuff like that in there. So it's going to be as packed as the First Blood collector's edition was, with the bonus, and you became impressed by that it's going to be for the first time a hardback. And they'll be signed, and they'll be numbered, and it'll be acid-free paper, all the stuff that collectors expect. So I'm pretty excited doing this. And then this is the 2016 and 2017. There will be a similar edition for Rambo 3, and that'll have unpublished stuff in it. I found a chapter that wasn't used in the book.
Oh, excellent!
And and there'll be another essay this time from Entertainment Weekly about what happened to Carol Pictures and why they don't exist anymore, things like that. So I'm pretty, the whole thing is a really exciting project.
Yeah, I got letter O. My First Blood is letter O, so I guess that's like the 15th print or something like that.
I'm
sorry? The print I got is letter O.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's like the 15th.
The letters that were 25, letter 26 letters, uppercase alphabet, and then 26 lowercase alphabet for a total of 52. And again, it's for the collector's market.
It's fascinating, like that gorilla. The gorilla is just, wow.
Yeah, that's the untitled, the unused first chapter.
But to have that, like, I wanted to ask you, like, the greaser aspect, the greaser aspect look of Rambo in that. How did you come up with? How did you? Because like later on, in the published version of First Blood, you see he's in more of a military garb, But how did you come up with the greaser look that you kind of get from the gorilla chapter?
Well, Gorilla, of course, is that was the original title. As the Soldier's Run was another title, and I had several until we settled on First Blood. It shows how much my thinking had evolved in the chapter that was never used. Rambo is in fact a leather jacket, and that's obviously wrong. But I left it in just, so people could see how these things change and hopefully get better. But the discovery for me came when I was telling the story that I couldn't start it in the middle. If we don't know who these people are, we're not going to care. So I had to start. I finally decided with the scene in which the police officer and Rambo initially meet, and that was when he was hitchhiking into town. And I rewrote that novel a lot, and once I settled on that scene as the one that began the book, then I was in good shape.
Amazing. Because when the book came in the mail, and I was reading that chapter, I was like, oh, I wanted it to go on forever. It was like the tension.
I promise you, because it becomes a whole lot of running around.
Yeah, it's like a total alternate.
When you're saying, well, wait a minute, who is this guy? Who are these people? It was confusing. As exciting as it was confusing. And eventually, I was forced to use a flash, as I explained in the notes from the chapter. Eventually, after 30 pages, I finally had to flashback to show how all of this started with Rambo coming into town and why the police officer thought he was going to be a problem. And it, at a certain point, I said, why don't I just start there and get rid of all this stuff and put it over here and just take that where he walks into town, and that's the beginning. And a lot of the structural problems I was having got solved.
I know I wanted to ask you last time you were on, but we had some fan questions, so I didn't really get to ask you. But there's this section in First Blood, kind of like, when Teasel's having kind of the premonition, or not, I won't say premonition, but kind of like the vision of Rambo in the junkyard and all that. Was that kind of a nod to, I don't want to say astral projection, but kind of like in the old stories of knights or whatever, when they would go on quest, they would have these heightened kind of like heightened sense, kind of like something guiding them, because like the two almost become one at a point.
That's the idea. It has a lot to do with the idea of hunter and hunted. But before I talk about that, there was a book I used for research called The Hero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Camp. This same book, many years later, was used by George Lucas to help him understand what he was doing in the Star Wars saga. And in The Hero with 1,000 Faces, the hero's journey, there's a mystical moment that Campbell talks about, where the life and death issues of have caused almost a preternatural way for someone to see the world. Everything is so clear. I suppose the only way I could compare it is if anybody's ever played sports, and there's been a moment when, if you're a baseball player and that ball comes and you just know you're going to hit it, and you're going to hit it so hard and it's going to go so far, and in that moment when you hit it, it's like the whole universe explodes. Or if you're a football player and that impossible catch that you knew you were going to make, because everything was so clear and so in such slow motion. Or basketball players, you hear about basketball players from the far into the court throwing the ball and knowing before they threw it that the ball was going to go in at the far end, way down the court. And you think about the traditional hunted stories about the two becoming one. It's difficult to talk about, but you see it a lot in stories. If you look at, say, William Faulkner's The Bear, which is a hunting story, he gets into that too. What happens when you're in the forest, the primordial surroundings, and there's this life and death circumstance where everything becomes so heightened, it's almost like you could soar off the ground. And so I was trying to communicate that. And in the novel, Rambo is in a bat cave at one point. In the movies they made it rats, but in the novel it's bat. And it's horrific. It's horrid. And he manages to get through that experience, and it's almost as if he's had a mystical experience of he's going through the bat. And he comes out on the other side, seeing the world in a clarity and a purity that he's never experienced before. And meanwhile, the police chief has nearly died because of him having escaped through a slope of thorns, brambles, almost been flayed alive, but he's still there, but he's bled a lot, and he's in very bad shape. And he's having a similar mental, emotional experience because of his pain and what pain can do to a person in terms of perception. So they're both seeing in ways that are extraordinarily clear and extraordinarily heightened. And it's as if they can, in their imaginations, know what the other person is doing. And this is not uncommon in combat. If you talk to some people who've been in really extreme combat situations, often they feel as if they knew what they do before the opponent did it. So in that kind of motion is what I was trying to communicate. And the point, in fact, as you know from having read First Blood, Rambo even believes he's God. It was very mystical and heightened, in keeping with what MORRELL and Buddhism. It sounds like somebody's hammering in the background.
Yeah, I don't know. That's speaker pop. I don't know. It might be
kind of bursting through the floor.
Yeah, it's kind of like chopping up a bit. All right. All right. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was always wondering that, like going back before reading that, and wow, it was like reading that when I was younger too. I was like, wow, that's something I always wondered about between them.
There's something else we're talking about, which is I was raised in Canada, and I came to the United States when I was in my early 20s to go to graduate school at Penn State. And that was in 1966, and I had no idea what Vietnam was. And I found out. And I was required to sign a loyalty oath by shows you the tenor of the times. Penn State, I had to sign a loyalty oath. And I was told that as a guest from another country, I didn't have a right to political opinions, and I shouldn't talk about politics, which is, I guess, a reasonable requirement. But as a consequence, the Vietnam War heightened, and as the country polarized, there were hundreds and hundreds of riots in 1968 particularly, and then the campuses, college campuses began having demonstrations that